So I actually, I think there are two things kind of that really caught my attention when you were talking. One of them was how you referred to, even in the last 2000 years, Jewish communities, not just in the Arab world, but around the world, you referred to them as a Jewish nation separate from any nation they live within. Uh,
Mhm.
I want to ask, what's the significance of using the word nation here as opposed to ethnicity or culture? Because I wouldn't really say, you know, uh, it's difficult. Would you extend that logic to any ethnic group with a distinct culture living in a larger nation?
Yeah, so it's a very good question. And again, I think I need to define the terms that I'm using. I don't mean nation like American nation or
Yeah.
like the British nation. I mean nation like the First Nations, the Native Americans. I mean nation
Hmm.
like the Tibetans, the Yazidis, the Kurds, where it's not just, okay, we all live here, we all have this piece of paper, we all have this experience, thus this is who we are. There's a deep connection and culture rooted to this population that transcends generations and generations to come, and that allows them also to be fundamentally connected to a specific piece of land.
Hmm.
Like for Tibetans, no matter where they're displaced, they always must return to Tibet. Maoris must return to their land, Polynesians, Aboriginals. And this is kind of what I mean by nation. I don't mean it in the modern sense of what we hear as nation. I
Yeah.
mean it as we're the descendants of a collective that comes from there, that our identity, way of life, culture, language, history, aspirations all comes from there. I mean, even I'm sure you know, as someone who's obviously very intellectual, you've probably seen in some movies where Jews get married and then break a glass and yell Mazel Tov. And the breaking of that glass is one element of many elements within our culture to symbolize the destruction of Jerusalem by the Roman Empire and the promise that our children in this marriage will one day come back to Jerusalem and free the land. Now, I think what's important to understand is it's not freeing the land of the inhabitants. It's freeing the land of the British. It's freeing the land of the Ottomans. It's freeing the land of the Romans, of people that aren't local, that aren't from this region, that are imposing laws onto the native populations, onto the local populations, and preventing us from actually living and creating a civilization that functions for both.
Hmm. So it's very much just the feeling that no matter where you are, no matter what language you speak, there's an inalienable connection to a piece of land, and also a feeling that would you say that there's also a feeling that no matter where you live, you don't feel you'll ever fully be a part of it? Is that is that also part of what you're saying?
It's definitely a big experience for the vast majority of Jews. And there are Jews that may assimilate and may forget that
Hmm.
and may not even understand their identity because they're born in the diaspora. And so they're disconnected from their language, their culture, even other members of their tribe, of their nation. Most of the tribes of Israel, we don't even know what tribes are from. Thankfully, I come from the tribe of Levi, which was passed down through my father. So I know what tribe I'm from, but there's a lot of things that were lost along the way. So there are people that might not see it this way. But the thing is about the rest of the world is the second that Jews forget who they are, anti-Semitism rises. And if they don't
Yeah,
remember themselves, at some point they're reminded in a harsher way.
yeah.
Wait, Rudy, can you speak on that a little bit more? What that means, that anti-Semitism rises when Jews forget who they are?
Right. So anti-Semitism is not the same, but it's a form of xenophobia that exists. So let's look at it through the lens of, homophobia, racism, being anti-women. You are fundamentally against this group of people. Like, let's look at in the United States, right? Clearly, there has been large movements to fight for Black rights, especially right now, as it's a hot topic in the US with everything that's going on, not just because of George Floyd, but everything that's been going on before that. And, I support that movement. I support them ending the struggles and the oppression that they experience. However, if you look on college campuses, people are able to respond to racism. So Black students, for the most part, are intellectually conditioned to be able to respond to racism and are fighting for their rights. And of course, when you fight for your rights, there's a lot of struggle and pain that follows with that. People die, people get beat up, people get jailed. So they're fighting for their rights. And by fighting for their rights, things are getting better. Clearly, in 70 years, where Black people didn't have rights, to today, things have got better. There's still plenty of much more to go into change. But when you are aware of your identity and the struggles that your people face, you fight against it, and it's, you know, gets better. When it comes to the Jews, whenever anti-Semitism rises, it usually rises in communities where the Jews are very disconnected to who they are. They've very much so assimilated and forgot what it was to be a Jew. They now see it as like a secondary religion, which was basically what Napoleon imposed onto the Jews to decide. And when we don't understand who we are, we don't understand what we are, and anti-Semitism rises, because there's always going to be forms of xenophobia, like racism, being anti-women, being anti-Jews will always exist. However, if that population and their allies don't realize what's happening and stand up and fight against it, naturally it will grow. It's our responsibility to fight against it in order to prevent it from happening again, which is why after the Shoah, after the Holocaust, we say never again. Doesn't mean it's not going to happen again. It means we take a commitment to make sure it doesn't happen again. So that's what I mean, that when we don't know who we are, we don't know where we're from, we don't know how to fight back, it rises because of that, because it's our responsibility to prevent it from rising.
Mm-hmm. Just to make sure I understood what you're saying, because, you know, it was kind of long. Are you saying that when Jewish people forget their Jewish identity or gain a dual identity or assimilate more into another culture or identity, they tend to be less defensive or assertive about their Jewish identity, which means that anti-Semitic movements or sentiments go unchallenged for longer?
Historically, yes. Historically, yes. There's a little bit more to that. Anti-Semitism starts to penetrate the societies, where usually it starts off with small radical movements, usually on the extremes, so the extreme right, the extreme left. So it starts off like that, and then it starts to become mainstream. And it's a process. It doesn't happen overnight. It usually happens, you know, a few decades, and it happened even in Germany. You know, the first people pushing Hitler's views and policies were the students on campuses. Like, students did Kristallnacht, where they smashed all the stores of the Jews in Germany. And so what happens usually is shifting the conversation, the mentality, the ideology of the younger generation eventually becomes mainstream. And if Jews don't recognize that and make the society understand that that is something wrong, then by nature, it will eventually manifest itself into something greater.